وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا.
This section will focus on how to calculate zakat. We will focus on some of the zakatable assets that we were not able to touch on before, namely health savings account and flexible spending account. How to calculate zakat on gold jewelry, upcoming expenses, what are considered as business merchandise and debts, real estate, the types of debts that one can deduct, and stocks, dividends, ESPPs, RSUs, as well as retirement funds, 401ks, and IRAs. So there are multiple zakat liable assets. Now we split them into two categories of simple and complex. These are our approach of explaining the different types of zakat liable assets there are. We'll go into the specifics of them in the following slides. But the main takeaway here is assets that are not covered. If one owns livestock, agricultural produce, honey, any type of animal products like milk, eggs, and haram wealth that one sells as part of their products, or land treasures that could be oil, could be hidden treasures in the ground. Those assets are not covered and need to be discussed at a later date. So the first one is currency, and this includes US dollars, cryptocurrency, and health savings account. We will mainly focus on health savings account and flexible spending account. Flexible spending account are not zakat liable. The reason is that you are not able to extract that money for any other purpose except for medical bills. The second piece is it's a use it or lose it situation, where if you don't use the money by the end of the year, those funds are gone. And so because this wealth is not within your control and grasp, there is no penalty that's applied to it. Zakat does not apply to flexible spending accounts. Health savings account are slightly different. Health savings account depend on you contributing money as well as your employer matching it. And those funds are restricted to a specific type of category, which could be medical bills, dental bills, pharmaceutical bills. In terms of calculating zakat on health savings account, you should look at how much of that wealth, of that amount, can be withdrawn post penalty and taxes. This varies by every employer, this varies by every program. So you'll need to analyze the type of health savings account that you have with your employer to see how much of that wealth can be withdrawn and then apply zakat on that amount. Calculating zakat on gold and silver is you take the value of the asset and you multiply by 2.5%. Calculating zakat on gold and silver jewelry is slightly different. For gold jewelry specifically, there are three variables involved: the price of gold in today's market, the number of carat that the gold is, as well as the number of grams that the gold weighs at, by a small scale that allows you to measure your gold in grams. In order to calculate successfully gold, what you need to do is understand how many carats that the gold is. You take the current modern day price of gold. You take $72, for example, today's market value of gold for a 24 carat is $72 per gram. You divide that by 24, then you multiply by the number of carat that your gold jewelry has. You multiply by the number of grams that you have to understand how much the value of that gold is. For silver, it's slightly less complex. You take the market rate of silver and you multiply it by the current market value to understand how much that silver is worth. And you multiply that by 2.5%. When going over Sabil's Zakat calculator, we'll go over some examples of how to calculate Zakat on gold and silver jewelry based off of today's market value. The next piece is upcoming expenses. Majority of the scholars say what you can deduct from upcoming expenses is 1 month worth of expenses and credit card bills. There are certain exceptions made for other types of expenses that you can deduct, such as Hajj or down payment. And this is based off of what has been contractually agreed or committed to. So if you have already agreed to Hajj and you have signed up with an agency and you have put your efforts and your money in place, this is a type of expense that you can deduct as the value of Hajj is pretty significant. Another type of expense that you can deduct is a house down payment. And this is not for a speculative buying, but a house that you have signed up for and you're just waiting on it to close. And so a down payment towards a house like that is a matter of exercising the contract itself. And so those are some of the types of expenses that you can deduct. So the first type of complex asset that we'll cover is business assets. Within this, there's two types: business merchandise and business debt. Business merchandise has zakat due on it for 2.5% of the asset based off of the current market value. Now, just to clarify, this is not the retail price, nor is it necessarily the wholesale price. But if you were to do a fire sale, which means you were to sell your entire inventory today, what is the value of the merchandise that you have? And you would put 2.5% of that to determine how much zakat you owe. Another type of value that you need to consider is accounts receivables. Accounts receivables are essentially deferred payments that you have with your vendors or your contractors that needs to be considered as part of zakat that are due. The next part is business debts. Debts that are to be paid that are not on a monthly plan are not zakat liable. And this includes account payables, which means you have received merchandise or product or service for something that you have yet to pay for, and you are on a deferred payment schedule of 30, 60, or 90 days. Can be considered as business debt and can be deducted from your overall assets. The next type of complex asset that we'll cover is real estate. The first type of zakat real estate is personal property. This does not have any zakat due on it. This is the house that you reside in that is for your and your family's purpose. The next type of asset is a real estate asset that is inherited. Those types of zakat assets are not zakat liable as well. So the third type of real estate is real estate that was purchased with the intent to sell. And this is at the time of purchase, that you had bought it with the intention to sell it at a later date. Not to reside in it, not to rent it out, but to sell it at a later date. This type of property is assuming that you bought it completely at 100% of your own assets, of your own money. According to Sheikh Joe Bradford, zakat is liable on this property, but at the time of selling the property at 2.5%. So when you sell the property, you pay 2.5% at that time based off of the selling price. Next are loans and debts. We covered hard loans in the previous workshop. We'll focus a little bit on soft loans. Soft loans are loans that were given that the debtor has the ability of paying back, or are also considered as recoverable loans, but has not been asked to do so yet. Majority of the scholars say zakat is liable on these types of loans. Our Sheikh Hatem believes that zakat is not liable on that, because when loans are given, they're given as a form of charity. And so the one who is giving the loan should not be penalized for giving a loan to someone. So they would end up paying 2.5% zakat on loans that take few years to recover, and so it is not fair for the one who is giving those loans. Moving on to debts. So before we get into the types of debts that can be deducted, it's essential to understand why are debts deducted. When someone gives a person a loan, when they're waiting for their funds to be refunded to them, they have more of a right to the wealth than any type of charitable contribution. So what can be deducted and what can't? Scholars say that anything that's on a fixed term payment plan, and that includes a home mortgage, it could include auto payment plans, it could include furniture that you've purchased at a store that has a fixed monthly payment, those cannot be deducted as debts because they were given in exchange for a specific type of product or good, and they were agreed with the lender and the debtor. But the types of debts that can be deducted are interest-bearing credit cards, debts to individuals, and certain types of student loans. When considering federal student repayment plans, these are typically on a fixed term payment. It should not be deducted from your zakat. Income-driven repayment plans potentially can be deducted, as the amount that you pay per month can vary and the duration of the term can vary to a maximum of 30 years. Those who are on a private student loan and the structure of those, they need to assess them individually as they vary by the lender. by the amount that you owe, as well as the terms of the loan itself. For private student loans, they vary by their structure, by the amount, and by the lender. And so you should meet with your local imam to discuss options regarding private student loans. Now, some of the examples that we mentioned regarding home mortgages, interest-bearing credit cards, student loans, some of these loans can be impermissible based off of the structure. We're not giving an implicit or an explicit approval of these types of loans, and obviously one should go by the being Sharia compliant in the type of loans and the financial transactions that they perform. So within stocks and mutual funds, there are two primary types of trades that occur. There's active trade and there's passive trade. Active trades are any stocks that are bought with the intention to sell within a year, i.e. day trading. All of these assets are zakat liable at 2.5% of the asset value. Passive trades are those that are bought with the intention to hold in a long-term trading. In essence, it could be a year, it could be 6 months, but you're not looking at swing trading in terms of the prices. And this is zakat liable, but only at 2.5% of the zakat liable asset value. Now, how do you calculate zakat liable asset values? When looking at a company's valuation, not everything in the company's valuation is zakat liable. For example, the real estate that the company owns is not zakat liable. However, the cash, the products, they are zakat liable. So how do you determine how much of a company is zakat liable? Well, option one is you analyze the company's revenue, assets, and liabilities to determine how much of the company is zakat liable. This can be by analyzing a company's 10K or 10Q statement. Obviously, this presents a bigger challenge, as people do not have the expertise nor the time to be able to go through them. On top of that, mutual funds are a conglomeration of multiple stocks. And so to be able to analyze all those stocks becomes very difficult. Alhamdulillah, Zoya Finance has provided a zakat calculator to determine how much of a publicly traded company is zakat liable. And they use the AOFI standard, which determines which assets are zakat liable. And this option is supported by Sheikh Joe Bradford. Now, obviously, Zoya Finance calculator is not a product of Sabil, and so the calculator itself and the quality and the dependency is based off of based off of the technology that Zoya Finance provides. Option 3, in the absence of option 1 and 2, is you default to the standard 33%. And this was based off of us analyzing several companies in the United States Stock Exchange to see how much of their asset value was zakat liable. Scholars came up with percentages between 25 and 30%, and so they have defaulted to a standard 33% with amount of buffer. This opinion is supported by AMJA, the American Muslim Jurists Association, Fiqh Council of North America, the AOFI standard, as well as Sheikh Hatem Al-Hajj. Now, just to clarify, a company's valuation is based off of multiple different factors, including real estate. Zakat is not liable on the company's real estate unless they're in the business of buying and selling real estate. So, for example, a company whose warehouse or its offices, corporate offices, that real estate is not zakat liable. Okay, so how should we handle ESPPs, RSUs, and dividends? Dividends are very simple. If you're going to treat it as cash, then the zakat is due on its entire value. But if the dividends are reinvested into the stock itself, they'll be treated as passively traded stocks. RSUs. RSUs are restricted stock units that are given by an employer as part of your compensation. There's typically a vesting schedule that's provided as part of the RSU plan. You are only responsible for paying zakat on the vested portion of the RSUs, and they will be treated as passively traded stocks. Even if you sell the stocks immediately after it vests, they will still be treated as passively traded stocks. The next one is ESPPs, which stands for Employee Shared Purchase Plan. Typically, your employer will give you a discount for buying the company stocks that you purchase. If the stocks are bought with the intention of selling them immediately, and the stocks purchased are within a year, then they would be treated as actively traded stocks. But if the stocks are purchased with the intention of keeping them long term, then they would be treated as passively traded stocks. Now, the last type of complex assets that we're going to look at are retirement funds. And this pretty much breaks down into two different categories: traditional IRA and Roth IRA. The first type of IRA is an individual retirement account. Traditional IRAs take advantage of pre-tax contributions and allow it to grow and then are taxed at withdrawal. So you put in $100, that's not taxed, and then once it becomes $1,000 at withdrawal, that's when the government will tax it. The similar plans to this are 401ks and 403bs. The Roth IRA is an individual retirement account that takes advantage of tax-free growth. So in essence, you put in $100, the government charges tax on those $100, but your contributions grow at a tax-free growth, and at withdrawal, you will not be taxed. Accounts such as these or 529 college savings, follow a similar concept and logic. Now, how much zakat do you owe on a traditional IRA? There's three primary opinions that we're going to focus on. The first opinion is that you owe zakat on the entire amount after deducting taxes and penalties. Now, assuming you have a 10% penalty, which is a standard penalty for a traditional IRA, and assuming you're in the 30% tax bracket, that means 63% of the asset value is zakat liable. And so you would apply 2.5% on the 63% to figure out how much zakat you owe. The next opinion is that zakat is due on 33% of the asset value. So this follows the same logic as opinion 1, except they say that not the entire company that's in your portfolio, that your retirement account, is zakat liable. As we mentioned in the previous slide, that there are certain types of assets within a company's portfolio that are zakat liable, and so this assumes that 33% of a company that you have invested in is zakat liable. Now, this applies typically to when your retirement funds invest in stocks, mutual funds, or ETFs. So how do you calculate zakat on this? According to opinion number 2, you take your asset value, you subtract your penalty, you subtract your tax bracket, and then you take 33% of the remaining value and you apply 2.5% off of that, which roughly translates to 20.8% of the asset value is zakatable, and then 2.5% of that 20.8% is how much you owe in zakat. The third opinion is that zakat is not due on retirement funds if it's not easily accessible without penalty. Zakat would be due on the retirement funds only after reaching the retirement age, which is 59.5 years old. The second opinion is the opinion that's supported by AMJA, the Fiqh Council of North America, as well as Sheikh Hatem Al-Hajj. Now, looking at the opinions regarding Roth IRA, they follow the same logic as the opinions on traditional IRA, but the slight difference is because you're benefiting from a tax-free growth, you don't need to factor in deducting taxes when calculating how much of your asset value is zakatable. So opinion 1 says the entire amount is zakatable after deducting penalty. The second opinion says, again, that 33% of the asset value is zakatable after deducting penalty. And the third opinion says zakat is only due on the contribution portion and its respectable zakat liable assets. And this is because you can withdraw your contribution from a Roth IRA without penalty. Now, just to clarify, penalties apply to contribution amounts that are less than 5 years old. So if your Roth IRA contributions are more than 5 years old, even the penalty does not apply. So now, regarding 401ks and 403bs, these typically follow the traditional IRA. The only difference here is that they have contributions that are employer matched. Now, in some cases, depending on the employer and depending on the 401k plan and the 403b plan, that some of the contributions by the employer will not be vested. If the amount of the employer's contributions are not vested, you do not owe zakat on them. You will only owe zakat on them once they have become fully vested. To understand how much of the contributions are vested or they're not vested, you will need to analyze the retirement account itself, and there should typically be a line item that says vested portion versus non-vested portion. Which brings us to the US retirement funds. Currently, there are $38 trillion in US retirement funds, which is equivalent to the GDP of the entire continent of Asia, which includes Russia, China, India, Middle East, and so many more. If people were to give zakat in a hypothetical situation, the bare minimum, which is option 2, at 0.5% of the $38 trillion, that would equal to $190 billion. According to Oxfam, to solve world hunger, you need $40 billion. Imagine being able to solve world hunger 5 times over. Sheikh Hatem very beautifully put that the poor will not wait for you to retire so that they can get their fair share of their zakat. As we mentioned, one of the objectives of zakat is the right of the poor and how to facilitate them getting their zakat. The poor won't wait for you to retire so that they can get their fair share. Hence, the second opinion, both within traditional IRA and Roth IRA, is supported by most of the scholars and the fiqh councils of North America, as well as the AMJA. Now, I know we went over a bunch of different assets, the calculations behind them, and many of you feel that these numbers are incredibly complex. Why is the calculation of zakat so nuanced? It is to reduce the zakat burden on you when you are giving it. See, we can very simply say 2.5% of zakat is due on your entire asset value. But then the zakat bill that you pay will be significantly more and unbearable. Hence, the scholars try to analyze assets and how they're used to make sense for what makes sense for both the poor as well as the one giving it. And if one gives more, Allah will bless you with more. We shouldn't try to find loopholes to avoid zakat the way we do with taxes. May Allah accept our zakat, soften our hearts towards those who are less fortunate, and forgive us for the places we fall short. For anything I said that is right is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything I said that is wrong is from me, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me.